Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Alta Mentoring podcast. My name's Akeelia, and I'm the ED&I executive at the Royal Aeronautical Society. And I'm really excited to be hosting another podcast about the Alta Mentoring platform. So for anyone that doesn't know, Alta Mentoring is a platform that launched in 2019, and it's a free platform created by women for women and allows users to develop a mutually beneficial mentoring relationship between women in the aerospace industry. Now, an incredibly important part of the Alta Mentoring platform is providing training for users. The training modules are there to support users with creating and developing their mentoring relationships. And in this podcast episode, I'm joined by Professor Sue Durbin, Liz Mulhall, and Alessandra Badino, and we'll be discussing the latest Alta training module, which is centered around the topic of intersectionality. Before we get into this discussion, I'll introduce our guests today. So Susan Durbin is a professor in human resource management at the Business School of the University of the West of England. Her research expertise is in gendered employment, specialising in women's employment in male-dominated professions, including engineers, scientists, commercial pilots, and managers and senior managers, working reduced hours and hybrid working. She is a co-founder and chair of the award-winning Alta Mentoring platform and lead and co-designed the UKRI funded Reaching My Potential Future Flight Challenge mentoring programme. Sue works within organisations in the public, private and non-for-profit sectors to improve gender equality and provide support, including mentoring for women. She is a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development and a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society. Sue is also a member of the Women in Aviation, Aerospace and Space Committee at the Royal Aeronautical Society and a member of the Women in Aviation Training Steering Group at the Haledale Group. Then we have Liz Mulhall, who is a business psychologist and workplace coach specialising in workplace wellbeing and neuro-inclusion. She serves as a board member of the Association for Business Psychology and is a strong advocate for the importance of evidence-based practice in the workplace. Liz has a background in recruitment and HR and transitioned into business psychology to support organisations to improve workplace experiences relating to wellbeing and inclusion. Liz has conducted research into the ADHD diagnostic experience of women and workplace disclosure, and is particularly passionate about exploring the workplace experiences of neurodivergent women. Liz incorporates an intersectional perspective into her work, advocating for inclusivity and recognising how complexities of identities can shape individual experiences. And finally, Alessandra Badino is a chartered aerospace engineer and a fellow of both the Royal Aeronautical Society and the Royal Geographical Society. She started her career in engineering with a focus on developing breakthrough innovation through large international research programmes before transitioning into business development and supply chain management. Recognising the key importance of developing and integrating a sustainability mindset in both business and society, Alessandra has taken the role of Head of Sustainability and Environment for Airbus in the UK and has also co-founded an environment and people-focused consultancy, Blue Future Studio, to help the transition to a sustainability culture. A passionate advocate and promoter for equal opportunities in the workplace, Alessandra is a founding and steering member of Alta Mentoring, and she was the 2023 recipient of the Royal Aeronautical Society's Hardingham Sword Award. So thank you, all of you, for joining me. So my first question is for Sue. So obviously the module that we're talking about is about intersectionality, but what is intersectionality? Could you describe that concept for us?
Yes, thanks, Akeelia. And I think it's important. It's a good question because we need to understand why we introduced this module on intersectionality. So from an academic perspective, intersectionality, it wasn't really widely recognised until about the 1980s. And there was a black female law professor in the States called Kimberly Crenshaw. And as a law professor, she was looking at the way that the law is applied, for example, in gender inequality cases. So she was interested in something that we call critical race theory and the intersection between race and gender. So she introduced and developed what we call intersectional theory. So before Kimberly Crenshaw, we can't say that people didn't take an intersectional perspective, but she gave it a name and she developed it more critically. And later on, she talked about intersectionality from a feminist perspective. So her original work was based on intersections, for example, age, ethnicity, gender, but she later moved that on to look at feminism and how women might be discriminated against or victimized based upon different characteristics. So she wrote a seminal paper in 1989 on race and sex. And this was kind of like a foundation of the Black feminist critique of white feminism. So the Black feminists were basically saying, hey, we're not, not all women are the same. So Black women might have different challenges in society, at home and in the workplace compared to white women. And quite a bit of work, for example, by Patricia Hill Collins, looked at violence in the home and how Black women may experience life in the home differently to white women. So it kind of started as a critique of white feminism and the assumption that all women are the same. And Kimberly Crenshaw looked at the oppression of African American women. And as a law professor, she looked at how the law responds to issues that include gender and race. So what she was saying was, if the law says we can look at discrimination on the grounds of gender or on the grounds of ethnicity, then we're not able to see how Black women may be discriminated against more than white women. So it was a really powerful argument. So the basic premise was the rejection of feminism as being white and looking at those overlapping identities of things like race, class and gender. So Patricia Hill Collins, for example, looked at race, gender and social class. So within intersectionality, when we talk about the different characteristics, we look at multiple forms of inequality. So these include, but they're not limited to, gender, ethnicity, class, nation, religion, able-bodiedness, sexual orientation, age, for example. And more latterly, we now have more of a focus on neurodiversity. So, all of those protected characteristics that come into play in women's lives. So intersectionality rejects the notion that race, gender and ethnicity and class, for example, are separate. That's really key to this. So they interact, they're not separate categories. And so that's why it became a central study to inequality, identity and power relations. So I always like to give examples of how we can apply intersectional lenses. So a colleague of mine, Professor Hazel Conley, she did an intersectional study of bullying and harassment in the British rail sector, and it was a full intersectional analysis. So she said that intersectionality developed to understand how multiple categories of inequality can interact. I think that's a key thing here, interaction, that produce distinct experiences that can't be captured by if you just look at a single category. So she used quantitative research to look at the separate categories. That's what we call an additive approach. So you look at race, you look at gender, you look at age, and then they took what we call a multiplicative approach. So how gender, age, race, disability interact. So what they found was women have a higher chance of being bullied, especially if they're disabled, and even more significantly, if you add ethnicity and age to that. So if you're an older woman from a non-white background and disabled, you were far more likely to be bullied. So I think that's a really good example of why we need intersectionality to understand what's going on. So the advantage of that approach is that it reveals those multiple forms of oppression, and really extreme cases can be brought to light through that analysis. But of course, there is a challenge to doing this, and that is, we have 9 protected characteristics within the Equality Act 2010, and trying to use all of those categories and to really understand what's going on can be quite a challenge, especially if you're writing academic papers and you end up with large amounts of data. So if you go back to people like Patricia Hill Collins, they will look at race, gender and class. So that's how people start to focus on the concept and to look at some key categories. So yes, so that they're the origins of the term.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Sue. Yeah, I've read a little bit about intersectionality, but that's a really interesting bit of background, and it's yeah, a really interesting concept. So thinking about kind of, obviously we know what, now that we know what it means, what, I guess, thinking about what does intersectionality mean to all three of you, especially coming from your different perspectives. Alessandra, can I start with you?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to mention that it's been a brilliant collaboration that we've had with Liz and, of course, with Sue for decades now on Alta to bring academia and industry together. So today I'm the voice of business, of industry, if you want, but it's been a very interesting process to consider and understand theory, academic research, but then see how it is applied, in the workplace. So for myself, at the start of my career, I was very focused on technology with an engineering background. But as I developed and I started to be part of project teams and then lead teams, I realized that businesses, after all, are at the heart communities of people. And so I learned the importance of skills like connecting, supporting, and sharing within the work environment. And also, I discovered that we have biases. Uh, at the beginning, we were looking at women in the male-dominated industry. So it was bias that men may have around women in the workplace. But the truth is also that women have got biases. And this was one of the, if you want, starting point of the discussion we had within the Alta steering group. We look around the team and we realized that we ourselves had different characteristics, and maybe we were not representing all of the variety and diversity of women that we were representing. And that was the spur for us to think about developing further the topic of intersectionality and develop this training module that we now have on our website. And so to me, then, intersectionality means looking at people for who they are, regardless of this continuous tentative that we do to put them in different boxes. And the point is, when you are a leader in a business, that to welcome people in our teams, benefit from their unique characteristics, and allow them to flourish. So support them and provide them with what they need in order for them, for their gifts to blossom. And I was very lucky that when I was asked to take this new challenge of creating a sustainability function in the UK, I had the opportunity to really handpick my team. And I made sure to put that thinking in action in the way I selected them for the variety of skills and behaviors and values that they were bringing. And I see that as one of the strongest assets of my team and my function. There are other ways in which I can think of intersectionality in my business. One is through the development of employee resource groups. These are groups of employees that offer some of their volunteering time to support their colleagues, whether through disabilities, different genders, ethnicity, also multi-faith. We had a recent group created of that have different moments throughout the year to share faith moments with colleagues, and also even more recently a neurodiversity group as well. And they've all come together to share, develop together, and also help others to learn. And this is done also through mentoring opportunities. And one last case I wanted to bring is also looking outside of the business at how we develop the communities around us, and also, the pipeline of young talents that will then eventually, hopefully, join our business. So we have a renewed focus, especially through our sustainability strategy, on bringing social value. So this is, for example, by transforming the traditional STEM activities that we used to do to target not only women, but also more generically vulnerable communities. so that we can provide better opportunities for children to gain the skills they need and get better opportunities to find work. And also looking more at the environmental aspect of the current crisis and, for example, brought by climate change. So how do we provide a transition to a decarbonized society that is fair and just? So how can we bring everyone on board in an equal standing to what we're trying to achieve in sustainability? So these are just some of the themes that I connect with intersectionality.
That's so interesting, and I love to see that the Airbus are taking that kind of intersectional approach. I'll go to Liz next. So what does intersectionality mean to you?
So for me, intersectionality should acknowledge the complexity and the uniqueness of the human experience. There's many factors that will contribute to someone's identity, but also to the experience they have in the world. So it's really recognising the differences in experiences that we might have, the multiple dimensions of identity. So that's sort of within the person, but then also the systems in which we're operating in, and so the role that they can play in creating oppression and privilege, and that you can experience both. The role of power, particularly prevalent in the workplace, and thinking about how racism can find its way into work, how discrimination can be played out, and just what those experiences are. So you've got the experience of individuals, but then the system that allows it to operate. So for me, it's about bringing awareness to some of those experiences, but also to the system that will allow this to happen. And how can we start to deconstruct that? Or how can we raise the awareness of that to people so they can understand it a little bit better? So I'm just thinking in the workplace, when Alessandra was saying about the employee resource groups, I'll always remember feedback from people that could identify with multiple groups. Which ones do they go to? Do they go to all of them? And so intersectionality can really play out quite a lot in some of these situations. And quite commonly, so my work, I'll often work alongside DEI managers. And so there tends to be this focus on one area at a time. So I remember talking to a business that was focusing on gender for now. And that tends to be a good place to start and where a lot of people will begin their journey for inclusion. But they don't always take an intersectional approach. So this can be really helpful here to think about how do the experiences of different women occur across the workplace. So for me, there's the real practical element within work, but also just this general awareness that people will experience life and work experiences quite differently. So this module will really raise awareness of that and hopefully build some understanding of other experiences.
So it's brilliant, thank you. And we will talk a little bit more about the module in a moment. But and lastly, Sue, so you obviously gave us a really good introduction on intersectionality, but what does intersectionality mean to you specifically?
So as a social justice case, there's no question that intersectionality for me as a feminist is hugely important. But I'll talk from some of the work I've done and how I apply both my personal and my academic perspective. So my view is that, the voices of the marginalised, don't get heard at work, in the workplace. A lot of my work's about the workplace. So we need to be able to hear those voices and to see how we can make the workplace a more equal place. So interesting that Alessandra and Liz both raised ERGs, employee resource groups, because I've often wondered, yes, I take an intersectional perspective. I look around me and networks are most often there's a gender network, an ethnicity network, a neurodiverse network, and it does make me wonder how do we join all of that together for a truly intersectional approach. But basically, I do think, we do have to embed that intersectional lens within the workplace, but also within society. So if you look at gender pay gap reporting, that's fantastic that we have it. That's been around since 2017. And there was talk about introducing an ethnicity pay gap report, but that seems to have been dropped by the government. But what about gender and ethnicity? What about intersecting it and really saying, that we know there's a gender pay gap, but is it even worse for women in particular categories? When we look at promotions, who's actually getting promoted and who isn't? If we look at women in senior management, which has been one of my research areas for years, oh yes, women are progressing now into senior management roles, but how many Black women are in those positions? How many disabled women? So there's so much that we still need to learn. And I led a project recently with a local Bristol business. It was a consultancy project, and we were looking at how we could encourage organisations to actually get hold of this intersectional data. So, to what extent do they ask questions of their workforce and actually analyse them from an intersectional perspective? And we also asked employees, would you be happy to give your data? And interestingly, a lot of the employers were from employer resource groups. And they basically said, I'm more willing to give my data if I know my employer is going to do something with it, really look at, if there are particular groups that need more support and actually put programs in place to do that. So I'm very much a kind of action-based, yes, I know the theory, I understand the theory, but I'm very much an advocate of let's now put that theory into practice. And I think that's how I do it. And I say, everybody should be valued and made to feel welcome at work, irrespective of any of their characteristics. And I think using intersectionality helps us to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you were mentioning like things around like the gender pay gap and stuff like that. So could you talk a little bit more, Sue, about why intersectionality is so important to that gender equality kind of goal?
Yeah, I mean, we know what a headline gender pay gap is, yeah. So, but it's by gender. So my point is, if we really wanted to drill down on the worst pay gap, so I've seen pay gap data by broken down by ethnic group and then by gender. And if you look at Bangladeshi women or Pakistani women, they have terrible pay gaps compared to white women and white men. So, that's the point I was making, really, that we have a headline pay gap, but that could be much bigger in some cases and much smaller in other cases. And I think until we start to really take this apart, then it's not as easy to understand and to see how it can be addressed. We need the information, but we also need action to address inequalities.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think we can kind of have lots of thoughts and ideas around how we can move towards sort of true gender equality. But I think you're absolutely right. It's more around kind of that action and actually making real sort of tangible change, I think. So we're obviously here talking about alta mentoring and the new module that we've got. But Alessandra, can I ask you how, from your perspective, how intersectionality comes into play when we're looking at mentoring relationships?
Yeah, sure. I've been very fortunate to be the mentor of many different amazing women. They've come from different backgrounds, especially since I've moved in the field of sustainability. Women have really risen to the challenge and have put themselves forward to become sustainability ambassadors and leaders. And they reflect in the mentoring relationships the different challenges and sometimes obstacles they found in their career due to their different characteristics. And mentoring is, for me, first of all, about active listening. So there shouldn't be just a reflection of who the mentor is and what experiences the mentor has, but it's really actively listen to the other person in both ways and encourage openness. So encourage the other person to be transparent and honest and feeling respected and trusted about sharing their experiences, because I believe that there is a huge amount of strength in awareness, in gaining awareness. That was the case for me when I first joined Alta, and I learned about the issue of women in a male-dominated workplace. And the same would be for intersectionality. It is a topic that we still need to develop and make more people aware of. And I think that that will create also a springboard for them finding more confidence and courage to speak up and to discuss these topics more openly, also in the workplace, within teams, with your manager. And that's the way that I can see in my business that we are making progress. Very good point that Sue and Liz were raising about ERGs, that if they remain compartmentalized, they will not help. But one of the things that we are trying to do is to create various opportunities throughout the year for all of them to come together. We often call it like a marketplace where all of the different groups are present, and just the population can come and talk to the different people from the different groups. And we obviously encourage a lot managers as well to come and become aware, so that they can look at their teams and help them facing these challenges. I just would like to mention that Alta as well offers great opportunities of networking. A lot of my mentees I've met that way. And it's again an opportunity more widely with the rest of the sector for women to come together. So of course it offers even a wider opportunity for women that come from different backgrounds and have different characteristics to get together. I think one of the next ones would be over Christmas.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a great opportunity there through Alta. That brings us really nicely on to talking about the platform and obviously this new module. So Liz, could you talk a bit about why you guys created a module focusing upon intersectionality? And then could you also tell us a bit about the module content that users will expect to see?
We actually started looking at a module on neurodiversity initially. So that's where this project started. And then this quickly expanded into looking at the experience and importance of all women and intersectionality. And it was really clear from talking to Sue and Alessandra that inclusion was really important, and that Alta was suitable for all women and those who identify as women. So there was this real focus on all women being included, and just to start to raise awareness of some of those experiences. So the purpose of this was to upskill and raise awareness, to help mentors understand that not everyone's paths will be the same. Some people will experience barriers that others will not have faced, and they might not have considered that within their own lived experience. So it's looking to raise that awareness by focusing on different areas of intersectionality. And so the approach was to look at what academic research exists already. And there were some limitations there with finding research on more than 3 identities. So as Sue mentioned earlier, you really don't see research beyond that. So there were some limitations there. There was quite a few white papers that we used. So we're using some of that research, some of the data from there. And then that really started to build out the content for the module. And in terms of what it covers, so it's focused on the experiences of women at work. And it starts off by giving an overview of intersectionality, what it is, why it's important, and the relevance to Alta. And then we deep dive into different areas, so age, ethnicity, sexual orientation and gender identity, disability, and neurodiversity. And across this, it includes definitions, use of language and terminology, some legal considerations, what the research says, what data we've got, any reviews of the white papers or key research and evidence that comes from that, and then also some top tips for mentors, so things to consider. And so how it can help them practically is really to raise awareness, bring in some different perspectives and experiences, and to help them to advocate for others, essentially.
Brilliant. That's really good. That sounds really, really interesting. As I'd love to know from kind of all of you, how you think the new module might support users in their journey. Sue, can I come to you first, please?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I think let's think about mentors, because we always tend to think about the mentees for mentoring schemes. But I was just thinking about my own experience of being a mentor on Alta, and the difference between mentoring different age groups, for example. So, you know, quite a few women come to Alta because they work in very male-dominated industry. That's one of the reasons it was designed. But you know, if you think about, if you have a younger woman as a mentee, so I'm talking from the mentor perspective, then I think you have to think differently about how you would mentor that woman compared to a woman who's more senior or established in her career. So I think younger women, you know, it's like learning the ropes. They might feel intimidated being in a male-dominated environment. They haven't established themselves yet. Whereas more established women might be more confident, but they still have challenges, and you know, they might want to be mentored around technical skills or knowledge, which I don't really do as an Alta mentor, because I'm more around project management and, you know, academic studies. But I have found that I've had to take a different approach according to the age of my mentee. So I think that's, you know, gender and age there, I think, is a good intersection to think about. And, you know, if you have a neurodiverse mentee, you know, if they declare to you that, you know, they're neurodiverse, you have to think about how you communicate, you know, if you meet online, or if you're writing to them, they're writing to you. So, yeah, I think from the mentoring perspective, I think it's important for mentors to be extremely aware of, you know, I'm mentoring a woman, but actually, you know, let me get to know a bit more about that woman, and let me understand how the mentoring is going to work in terms of, you know, what we really need to do together, and setting a small number of objectives that would be achievable within the mentoring time, however long that happens to be. But I just want to say that, you know, we designed this module because we want it to make it clear, make a statement that Alta is open to all women, or all people that identify as women. And I think that covers the intersectional approach.
Definitely. That's super, super great to hear. And Liz, how do you think the module might help Alta users in their kind of mentoring journey?
Yeah, I'll take a similar approach to Sue. So think about mentors and then mentees. And I was just thinking of my experience of being mentored and being a mentor. Often you'll look for someone for similarities. You'll look for someone who's walked the path that you want to. There's often a commonality. And whilst there can be real benefits to that, there can also be real benefits from a different perspective, different experiences. So I think with this and the way it's been designed, or the ideals, is raising that awareness and understanding of difference in experience, of difference in perspective. And there will be real benefits to both. So both mentors and mentees will be able to upskill and learn about different experiences of women. Being able to, so this is thinking of mentors, being able to advocate for others in the workplace a little bit more, and just acknowledge the importance of intersectionality. So hopefully through using the module, going through the module and taking this approach in mentoring, they'll be able to share that with others and just start to raise more awareness of the importance of intersectionality. I think for the mentees, feeling acknowledged, validated, heard, I think that experience could be very welcoming for them. And just real benefits to know that there's been some training or some awareness on how their experiences might be different, and knowing a little bit about the barriers that they may have faced could be very reassuring. So I think there can be some real benefits to both mentees and mentors by going through this.
Yeah, that does sound really like it will be a very, very beneficial. journey for them. And Alessandra, from your perspective, how do you think the new module will support alta users in their journey?
I'm also a big advocate for women to put themselves forward as mentors. I think it's quite difficult sometimes for women. We find a lot of women as mentees, but not as many put themselves forward as mentors. They tend to believe that to be a mentor, they have to have maybe all types of knowledge, or all types of they need to have all the answers. But the reality is that, at least for me, that being a mentor is an extremely enriching and learning experience, and you get to meet a wealth of diversity amongst women, different cultures and upbringings, and also just a different lens through which they see the world. And so mentoring relationship is about being together to develop winning strategies, and for both mentor and mentee to relive their own experiences with these new lenses and reflect of how they've overcame obstacles and challenges. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, there is a really strong strength. I'll repeat it. So I think there is a lot of strength in a mentoring relationship, and there is a feeling of pride as well in your own successes, that then by reflecting on your life journey, that come out of this relationship, and also by overcoming together hardships and moving on. So sometimes we have to also use a mentoring relationship to celebrate when there are successes. And sometimes it's a big learning journey. So the module that we have created, we hope that provides this learning opportunity and provides mentors and mentees, but especially mentors, to gain some extra lens so that they can be able to recognize if their mentees are suffering from any inequalities that are stemming from the intersection of these different characteristics, and provide the support that is required. I just also wanted to say a note about the fact that, maybe brought about by the specific area in which I work, but I see that we live in a very complex and uncertain world with several crises to deal with, inequality, poverty, all the way to climate change and environmental degradation. And women have a really key leader role to play in driving this transformation. And by embracing intersectionality, they can embody one of the very first principles of sustainability, which is about resilience. And resilience exists where there is diversity of life. And women, and especially mentors, women in position to bring change, who maybe manage teams or lead teams, can be an examples for others of the richness that comes from having this diverse ecosystem, and more collaboration than competition. So we really hope that ALTA will help both mentors and mentees to accomplish all this. And, we want to create a movement together.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. I really love that whole kind of global community that we are creating with ALTA. And you're right. I think we do live in such a complex world. So kind of taking on this idea of intersectionality is so important, so that we can kind of sort of push forward with those actions that Sue was talking about earlier of moving towards kind of true equality, I think. So I think that's a really good place to end our kind of chat there. So thank you so much, Sue, Liz and Alessandra, for joining me on this episode. I think it's been a really, really good discussion. So for anyone listening, if you'd like to explore the intersectionality training module, as well as the other 4 training modules that we have through ALTA, then you can go to altamentoring.com. And on the website, you can also find out more about the platform, and you can also register to join. We are very interested in having a lot more mentors joining the platform. So if you do think you could be a really valuable mentor to someone, then do go ahead and join for free. You can also follow ALTA on Instagram and on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening.